Dave from New York. And good morning, Baghdad. It is already tomorrow in Iraq, which means that it is the end of America's Iraq War, which started there 7.5 years ago for this reason.
We know that Iraq and al-Qaeda have had high-level contacts that go back a decade. We've learned that Iraq has trained al-Qaeda members in bomb making, in poisons, and deadly gases.
Iraq has sent bomb-making and document forgery experts to work with al-Qaeda. Iraq has also provided al-Qaeda with chemical and biological weapons training.
He's a threat because he is dealing with al-Qaeda.
Iraq was linked to al-Qaeda and therefore to 9/11, and therefore we had to invade Iraq. None of that was true. And so when those rationales stopped passing the smell test, the Bush administration decided to sell the American people instead on another justification for invading Iraq.
Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
Iraq's weapons of mass destruction are controlled by a murderous tyrant who has already used chemical weapons to kill thousands of people.
We know he's been absolutely devoted to trying to acquire nuclear weapons.
Saddam Hussein has and is amassing weapons of mass destruction to use against America. That, of course, turned out to be bullpucky as well. Leading Bush administration war proponent Paul Wolfowitz conceded later that it was mostly for political convenience that the Bush administration decided to go with the whole WMD argument in the early stages of the war. Speaking from the White House briefing room on April 10th, 2003, Press Secretary Ari Fleischer said this: "Make no mistake, as I said earlier, we have high confidence that they have weapons of mass destruction. That is what this war was about and is about. No, it isn't, and no, it wasn't, ever." Once the war was well underway, even the Bush administration was forced to concede, reluctantly, that there weren't weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, whereupon the president decided to make it into a joke.
No weapons over there. Maybe under here.
That was just as hilarious at the time as it still is today, with more than 4,400 American lives to bolster the belly laughs. Ultimately, none of the things our government at the time told us were the reasons we had to start a war in Iraq were true. Opponents of the war said they thought that at the time, and pretty much everybody else realized it soon after things really got going in Iraq. So then after Iraq did 9/11, after Iraq has WMDs, after those, the justification for the war started to change even further. We needed a new, yet new, retroactive reason for why that war had to be waged.
The rise of a free and self-governing Iraq will deny terrorists a base of operation, discredit their narrow ideology, and give momentum to reformers across the region. The goal in Iraq and Afghanistan is for there to be democratic and free countries who are allies in the war on terror. That's the goal.
Spreading peace and democracy. That was the third try at made-up reasons why we invaded. Fourth try was perhaps the most remarkable. Remember this? That we had to invade because Saddam Hussein was gaming the UN Oil for Food program.
Saddam was systematically gaming the system, using the UN Oil for Food program to try to influence countries and companies in an effort to undermine sanctions. America is safer today with Saddam Hussein in prison.
That was really the most amazing one. President Bush, who went to war in defiance of the UN, went to war in Iraq in defiance of the UN, trying to retroactively convince us that really we only went to war against Iraq to protect the integrity of the UN Oil for Food program. We're just taking care of our buddies at the UN. In the end, after riffling through all of those different rationales for invading, the Bush administration pretty much settled on the lone justification that nobody could take issue with. The lone justification that Saddam Hussein was a bad man.
I sent American troops to Iraq to make its people free. Removing Saddam Hussein from power was the right decision. The men and women who crossed into Iraq 5 years ago removed a tyrant. liberated a country, and rescued millions from unspeakable horrors.
Nobody will dispute the fact that Saddam Hussein was, in fact, a bad man, an evil tyrant who murdered his own people, committed countless atrocities like lots of other bad men around the globe. It should also be noted that Saddam Hussein being a bad man had absolutely nothing to do with why we invaded Iraq.
Iraq right now, even if the Kurds and the Sunnis and the Shiites don't want to fight each other, there are groups pushing them in that direction. And if there is a major catastrophe, a big bomb in Najaf, I don't think the country is strong enough to prevent another round of civil war, especially if they don't have a government. They have security forces that have been created by the United States and are pretty good. But if you don't have anyone leading them and you have fewer American troops, then you don't have effective security forces.
Right. President Maliki Prime Minister Maliki in Iraq today gave his own televised speech in Iraq, marking the same transition, just as Obama did.
He shouldn't even be prime minister. He was not elected. He didn't win the elections. He's hanging on to power. We're backing him right now. I've spoken with a lot of people who are involved in these negotiations. The deal is we'll try and reduce Maliki's influence and weaken his post a little bit, and we'll bring in Ayad Alawi, the person who actually won the elections, and we'll try and create some sort of power-sharing agreement. One, I think it will be a tremendously weak government that cannot handle the real problems, the people who are trying to push Iraq back into a civil war. And it's not anything that the Iraqis are used to. They had a centrally controlled government. Now they have no government. And if the American plan going forward is to give them some sort of weak consensus government, I don't see how they're going to get out of this.
Richard, we all know the list of justifications for the Iraq invasion, the predicted effects of the Iraq war that turned out to be bull. I went through all of those in my initial segment.
Yes, I heard the blossoming of democracy across the Middle East.
Democracy has not broken out in the Middle East.
No, it hasn't. Actually, if the idea is to stop weapons of mass destruction, Iran has been unleashed, and Iran, by all accounts, is trying to find and create a weapon of mass destruction.
And do you think Iran has been strengthened? They're the big winner from the Iraq war.
Of course they are. Of course they are. Most Iraqis, if you ask them what they're afraid of Americans leaving because they're concerned that Iran will be the biggest player. There are people who fought against the United States in Ramadi and Fallujah and the Sunni areas who now, and they didn't join, not people who joined the awakening, people who were with the resistance and who now say, maybe it's not a good idea for the Americans to leave because we really don't want Iran to come in and take over.
Wow. I mean, it is amazing to think that even without a new government being formed, even without us not knowing exactly where things are going, even with, as you're describing, the prospect of another civil war, the probably most accurate generalization we can make about what the effect on Iraq has been of this war is that we turned it from a Sunni dictatorship into the world's only Shiite Arab state.
Shiite, failed, sectarian, corrupt, oil patronage state. It is a basket case in the Middle East that is now being influenced by Turkey, by Kurdish nationalists, by Iranian religious parties, by Lebanese religious parties. It has become the world's playground and a place where you can make a lot of money. If you're an Iraqi contractor, if you're an American contractor, it has not been a stable state that can contain itself or certainly contain Iran.